Now with the way we're currently set up, there's a security issue. Allow me to explain. I'm going to go back to the home page, and this time I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it raw underscore data. And we're going to set this to just the word hello again. So we'll start all over. And one thing I'm going to point out is that in PHP, I'm used to using double quotes. So it's probably a better idea to use single quotes and just escape characters as you need to so they work correctly. But back to raw data down here. If I just output or echo the raw data, we can see that it echoes out like we expect it to. The secure issue is, what if I tell raw data to have bold tag and I just output it? Well, look what just happened. The text just became bold. The only way to do that is to edit the HTML of the page. So technically, I just edited the HTML of the page. So what happens if I put a script in here and I say alert, do double quotes to avoid that issue. We'll do double quotes to avoid a conflict with the PHP quotes. And I just say alert hey and I refresh. Look at that. By entering input here and just outputting the raw data, we actually took control of the page and we can control its JavaScript. So that's the security hole. Why is this particularly dangerous? Because when we get raw data, like from the form, from a user entering data, they could actually type this into the form field and mess with our page directly. Once they can get into JavaScript, they have access to file systems and can get the contents of include files, your config file, database information, and all that stuff. Since we're the ones typing the data, I'm not so concerned about it being dangerous. We're not going to hack ourselves. But a habit we should get into very early on is when you output data, you always want to create escaped data. Okay, and that is just, we're going to use a function called htmlspecialchars, and we're going to give that the raw data. Okay, so now if I change this to print out the escape data, or echo the escape data, we can see that it escapes the tags and no longer takes control of our page. In this case, we're using PHP's built-in function htmlspecialchars, and we're handing in the raw data. This is turning, if you right-click and view source, you can see at the top here, it actually escaped the characters. So it's not printing the less than sign or greater than sign, it's actually converted them to HTML entities. So it can't be run as code, it's only displayed as text. So you need to do this every time you output anything. And to be honest, we're going to use this every single time we output code. And htmlspecialchars is a pain to type every single time, like thousands of times. So we're going to create a little helper function for us called e. Now when you create a function, you have to be careful not to use one that's already taken by PHP. Functions work like this. I'm going to put one in my PHP code, and a function is not run until it's called. So it's okay to have it somewhere in your PHP, and it'll just wait until it's used. To use a function, you simply just declare it. You say, I'd like to call e now. Okay, so if we put, like, for instance, an echo statement in here, and we said hello from e, and you would see that just by calling e, we trigger this function, which echoes hello from e, and that's what shows up as our output. So a function is a handy way of taking care of something for us in an easier way. We can put lots of things in a function, but really a function is designed to do one thing at a time. If you find a function doing 5 or 6 and you're getting confused, that's a great sign that you need more functions that do one thing at a time. So in this case, let's try this. Let's get rid of escaped data, and we'll try to use the function instead. Let's take raw data and pass it into the function. Inside of the function, you need to receive that data. And you don't have to call it the same thing if you don't want to. But in this case, it makes sense to call it the same thing. I could call this input, right, or unsanitized data, anything I want. It doesn't have to match. Once I have raw data in here, what do I want to echo? I want to echo the raw data, but I would like to htmlspecialchars first. Okay, so what we've done is we've used a function called e, which is much easier to call. And we're just going to pass the raw data in through there, and then it's going to echo out that value for us. Okay, we're going to take this one step farther, and that functions can also return data. What does that mean? So instead of echo, I'm going to return the data, and it sends the data back to where it was called. So instead of putting echo here, I actually need to echo up here the returned data, and it'll return again. Now I'd like to use this method because you can just call it quickly, just like htmlspecialchars. It does the exact same thing, but it creates a much easier function to call hundreds of times on a page. To be able to use this function from any page on our website, this part's a little tricky, so follow along with me carefully. I'm going to take this function and I'm going to cut it out of this file, so I'll get an error that it doesn't run anymore. I'm going to come up into my includes, And inside of my includes, I created another folder called functions. And inside of that folder, I created a file called helper_functions. In that file, I'm going to start a PHP block. Just like every include, I have to start with this. There can't be any preceding spaces, returns, or characters. And there does not have to be a closing tag on the end. It's very important, actually, that there's not. Once I'm in here, I can paste that function here, and I'll just format it quickly, and you can see the page still doesn't work. If we want something to be available on every single page, what we have to do is register this new file with our website application. Now we have two choices. The config file is one choice, but we know the config file is restricted to only creating constants. Right? If you're not using define, don't put it in here. Which leaves the init file. And if you recall, the init file does have a section down below that's specifically designed to load additional include files. So what I've done is I've required once helper functions file. And because I included that file here, that function E is now available on every page. So if I save and refresh, it works again. And the cool part is I can use E from anywhere on my website now because it's registered as a part of my application thanks to how we set this up. So what we need to do now is head into our site header file and use that function, E, on outputting the page name and outputting the page description. Remember, anytime we output data, we're going to wrap it in that E function we just created. So to illustrate how this might work in the future, just to give you an idea, let's say that I have a number that comes out of a database for a product, and that number needs to be shown as a price each time. I really don't want to put a $sign in my code every time I output the number. So in this case, I would create a helper function. To do this from now on, since it's already hooked up, all we have to do is go into our helper functions and define a new function, like for instance called price, that accepts some sort of a number. We're going to make this variable up, okay, and it's going to return a $sign, and it's going to return a $sign concatenated with the number. So it's just going to put a $sign in the front. That's the only thing it does. If we go to our index.php page now, instead of echoing the raw data from E, I'm going to echo price and just pass in a number to see what happens. Let's do 45.99, okay, and it does put the $sign on it, and that's how fast that works. These functions are helper functions. They're designed to help make your life easier, so add to them as you go. If you find yourself doing something 5 or 6 times and you're getting sick of it already, make a function. The real key is with function files is not to have any output in here, so nothing should be echoing. No, you shouldn't have any stray variables in here. There should never be like a variable up here. Never, 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 never. So it's just functions. They're only things that are sitting there until they're called. To finish up, I'm going to go back to my home page and just get rid of all the debugging stuff at the top. I was only using that to see what I was doing. And then we can come down here and get rid of the raw data and echo price too. For each page, right now, all we have to know is a page name and page description. In fact, it might be a good idea to go to the site header and create a PHP comment at the top at this point in time. This way, every time I use this file, when I open it, I'll remember that it requires these two variables in order to run. And each time I add a variable to my header, I have to remember to add it to my notes as well.